My daughter-in-law banned me from going to my grandson's birthday party because she said I smelled bad. So I changed the locks on my house, and now there's not gonna be a party. I'm not sure how to even start this. I've read hundreds of posts here, but now that I'm actually sitting down to write my own, I'm not sure what to include or leave out. I'm 66 and single. I lost my wife 3 years ago, and I've been alone ever since. Honestly, it's been tough. Next Sunday is my grandson's birthday, and my daughter-in-law hasn't invited me to the party. I didn't even know there was a party until my friend, who lives next door to them, told me his granddaughter got an invite for my grandson's birthday. He had no idea I wasn't invited. We usually go for walks in the mornings, and on our walk, he told me about the party. I was shocked because I'm really close with my grandson, and he loves me too. He's turning one next Sunday. When my friend first mentioned the party, I thought it was just going to be a small cake-cutting thing with the neighbor kids. But then he told me it was going to be a big deal, and not just for the kids. Adults were invited too. The invite says the kid's name +1, and it even includes dinner. That surprised me because my son's not exactly rolling in money, so I didn't think he could afford something like that. I told my friend he was probably exaggerating, but then he sent me a picture of the invite. He was right. It looks like a huge party. That got me wondering why I wasn't invited, and I started feeling anxious. To calm myself down, I thought maybe they just forgot, or the invite was on the way. There's still 12 days until the party, so I kept getting more anxious. I decided to go visit my grandson. When I got there, I saw my daughter-in-law glued to her phone while my grandson was playing alone outside. I picked him up and played with him while my daughter-in-law watched from the window. She's always had an issue with me, never liked me or my wife. I don't really get why, but maybe she thought we were beneath her. She comes from a rich family, but we're not exactly poor either. We're just not as wealthy as her dad. And it's not just about money. It's also about social status. Her dad's a lawyer, and I'm just a mechanic with a small shop. If she's proud of her dad's money, it's kind of an empty pride, though, because her dad can't stand her and hasn't given her a dime, even when she's needed it the most. Last year, when my son lost his job during COVID, their finances were in pretty bad shape. She's a housewife, and they only had one income coming in. Losing that job was a huge blow for them. They started living off their savings, but that ran out eventually. My workshop business took a hit during the COVID lockdown too. I tried to help them as much as I could, but my own finances were tight. Things got so bad for them that they couldn't even pay rent. And then they got an eviction notice from their landlord. I was living alone, so I offered to let them move into my house while I moved into the workshop. I have a 2-bedroom house, one of which was the kids' room. I could have stayed with them, but I knew my daughter-in-law would feel uncomfortable around me. That's the backstory. This morning I went to visit my grandson, and I thought my daughter-in-law would tell me about her birthday plans. But to my disappointment, she didn't mention anything. I kept thinking maybe I was just forgotten and would be invited later, but now it seems clear she didn't want me there. It hurts to think that I did something wrong, and now I'm getting treated this way. I've always tried to make their lives easier, help them out whenever I could, and this is how I'm repaid. Update 1. Thanks for all the kind words. You're right. As in-laws, especially when we're in our 60s, we're often treated like we don't matter. I feel so lonely sometimes. 60 is a tough age. It's like you're too old to keep going but still young enough to feel stuck. I'm telling you, if you have a partner in your 50s or 60s, appreciate them, because once they're gone, you're really going to miss them. I never realized how important having a partner was until I lost mine. Now, my life feels so empty. Yesterday, my son called and said they were dropping my grandson off with me because they were going shopping. I watch him for them since hiring a babysitter costs money. And here I am, offering my time for free. They know how to use me, emotionally, financially, in every way. When they came back to pick him up, I asked my son if they were done shopping for the party. His face went white, and the back seat of his car was packed with stuff. Some party decorations were even sticking out of the window. He tried to brush it off and said, "Oh, no, it's not a party. We just got some toys for the baby." He's not great at lying. I looked him straight in the eye and said, "I saw the invitation card you gave to the neighbors." Before he could say anything, my daughter-in-law yelled, "So what? You're mad because you didn't get an invite to a kid's birthday party? You act like a little kid." The way she defended him really made me mad. I was furious, but I stayed calm and said, "Watch your tone, ma'am." My son said he'd come over the next day to talk things through, but he never showed up. How naive of me to think he'd come apologize for how his wife treated me, or even invite me to the party. Yeah, I guess I'm the deluded old man. I started thinking about how they could afford such a big party, then it hit me. They're probably using my money for it. Last month, my son borrowed money from me to pay his car payment. He said he was 2 months behind and the bank was chasing him for it. He promised to pay me back this month. But whenever he asks me for money, I know he won't pay me back. But I still lend it to him. I know I'm being too soft on him, but look at my situation. He's my only son, and I'm not getting any younger. What am I going to do with my money? Eventually, it's all going to go to him anyway. So why not help him out when he needs it? Up until now, I've never asked him to pay me back. So today, I called my son and asked for the money I lent him last month. I reminded him, "You promised you'd pay me back this month, right? So where's my money?" He didn't expect me to ask for it back. I told him, "I want it by the end of this week, like you said." He was shocked, like, "What?" I said, "You heard me right. I want my money by this week." He came over in the afternoon. I brought up his wife's attitude toward me. He said he knew, but there wasn't much he could do. I told him, "Yeah, you can't make your wife love me, but you could stop lying to me for money. I know you lied about the car loan to borrow money for this birthday party. I also know the party isn't just for the kids, it's for the parents too, with dinner." "Really?" I asked. "You have money to feed your friends and neighbors, but not me. Whose money are you using for all this?" After I went off on him, he said, "Are you mad because we didn't invite you? It's not me." "Sandra made the guest list," he said. I yelled, "You have no say in that. You're telling me you're okay with your wife not inviting your father to your son's first birthday party? For no reason at all?" He went silent and looked really down. What else could he do? He's too weak to speak up to his narcissistic wife. He's helpless in front of me too, since he still needs my money. Sometimes I wonder if I failed as a parent for not raising a stronger son. Update 2. I decided I wasn't going to get revenge, but guess what? Sandra crossed every line of toxicity on the birthday. I was sitting in the corner of my workshop, drinking, feeling bitter, when I got a call from my son. I was dumb enough to think maybe he felt guilty and was finally calling to invite me to the party. Don't judge me. I even bought gifts for my grandson. I thought if they invited me last minute, I'd still go. I'd been desperate enough to think that even if I wasn't invited, I still owed him a gift, and I'd drop it off the next day. But nope, the call was for babysitting. He had to rush to work and needed me to watch the baby. He told me Sandra went to pick up her parents at the airport. Hearing that, I lost it. His parents were flying in from 2 states away, but I'm not invited, and I live just a block away. Before I could say anything, he was already in his car and told me to hurry over to take care of the baby. I rushed over, and while I was with him, my phone kept ringing. I ignored it a few times, but then thought it might be important. Turns out it was Sandra. I thought I was talking to my son, but it was her. She was mad because my son wasn't answering her calls about the decorations. She got angry when she heard my voice. I told her, "I'm not crashing your house. Your husband had to rush to the office and ask me to look after his son." She screamed at me to leave before her parents arrived. I said, "How do you expect me to leave the baby alone?" She said she'd be back in an hour, and the baby could manage until then. But she didn't want me there when her parents showed up. Then she started going off about how I smell like fuel and grease, and my clothes were dirty. I felt humiliated, honestly. I cried holding my grandson. You have no idea how bad I felt. I quickly grabbed my stuff because if he came and saw me there, he'd yell at me. But as I walked out, a thought hit me. Wait, it's my house. That's right, I gave them my house to live in, and no, they don't pay me rent. I wasn't going to be their doormat anymore. I called my workers and we changed the locks. They packed up their stuff and threw it all outside. All their clothes went in boxes in my workshop. The furniture and electronics, all mine. They didn't bring any of it. Then I walked around the front yard holding my grandson, waiting for Sandra. When I saw her car pull in, I walked up to her, handed her the baby through the window, and walked back to my workshop. She put the baby in the car, or maybe handed him over to his parents, and came after me, screaming. She yelled at me, asking why I was still here when she'd told me to leave. I didn't even look at her, or respond. I just told her, "If you need help getting your stuff out, call me." Before she could say anything, I left. A few minutes later, my phone started blowing up with her calls. I ignored them. Then she sent me voice messages asking why the lock wasn't opening and why her stuff was outside. I laughed at the messages and thought, "Lady, take a hint. You're homeless now." I went to my workshop and sat at the door, knowing either she or my son would show up soon. And sure enough, there she was, hurrying toward me. I told her, "Before you get any ideas, let me tell you, I've got cameras everywhere. They're working fine." She kept yelling the same thing about the house not opening. I told her, "I changed the locks. The key's inside the workshop. It smells like oil and grease. Want to grab it?" She looked shocked, pulled her hair and screamed, asking why I changed the locks. I stared at her and said seriously, "Remember, that house is mine. I did you a favor letting you live there." She cut me off, asking, "Then why did you throw our stuff out?" I told her, "Because I changed my mind. I don't want you living there anymore." She stomped her foot, went back to her car, and drove off. I knew this wasn't over. A little later, my son showed up, red-eyed from crying. That's his manipulation tactic. He said, "Dad, please give us the keys. I promise Sandra will apologize." I stopped him. "Really? Sandra's gonna apologize to me? Where is she?" His face lit up, and he asked if Sandra apologized, would I give her the house back? I said, "I don't know, maybe. Depends on how she does it." He called Sandra, and from the way he was talking, it seemed like she wasn't ready to apologize. But about 10 minutes later, she showed up. She started with, "Look, I'm sorry." I told her, "Wait, let's sit inside the shop and talk." She hesitated, but my son gave her a look, and she followed us in, covering her face with a napkin. Her apology felt like she was doing me a favor. She said, "Okay, I'm sorry. I won't yell at you again. Give us the keys." My parents are waiting outside, tired from the trip. I was shocked by her apology style. I looked at my son wide-eyed. She kept going. "Okay, sorry again. No need to make faces. Our guests will be here soon. We need to get ready. You can join the party, but please wear new clothes." I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up and shouted, "Get out! Just leave and never show your face again. You're not getting the house back, not even when I die." Instead of apologizing, she started yelling at my son. "See? I told you. He won't listen. We should call the cops." He pulled her hands away and yelled back, "That's his house. We can't call the cops on him. They'll just say we're mistreating him." They left, shouting at each other. My neighbor said Sandra and my son came back, telling her parents what happened. I think he was twisting the truth. When my son explained the whole story, I heard her parents yelling at him. Update 3. My worthless son showed up at my door again. It had been a week since I kicked him out. It was almost midnight when I heard a knock. I opened the door and told him I had no business with him. He grabbed my hands and started begging me to let him in. He said he'd been living in the car for a week, didn't have enough money for rent and couldn't make ends meet. He cried, saying he couldn't pay the rent. I said, "Why don't you ask your spoiled wife to get a job?" He said she just didn't want to work. He saw it as a reward, saying she was out of his league. I burst out laughing. "Yeah, sure. Show off your trophy and get some bread. This old man has done enough for you guys." I told him, "Your wife has always been narcissistic to me, but I still gave you my full support. I gave up my house to live in the garage so you could be comfortable. And what did you give me? You let your wife humiliate me. Don't you have the guts to stand up for yourself? If you've got a golden wife, then live with her and don't come to me for help." He tried his last move, saying, "Please, Dad, give us the house for your grandson." I said, "Enough with the emotional manipulation. Don't you dare try to blackmail me anymore. You've been using me for my money and house with, 'Dad, please, for your son.' Now that's not working. You're using your son to get your way. Get out. You're not getting anything." The next day, he showed up with his wife and son. I told them, "I'm not accepting your apology. This isn't about birthday invitations. The hate is deep-rooted. She hates me because of my job, thinks it's nothing. I'm not going to let anyone disrespect what I do. Being a mechanic can be messy, with oil and grease all over our hands, but it takes skill. What do you even have? You're not working because you're pretty, and just because your dad's a lawyer doesn't give you the right to look down on people." She got down on her knees begging for forgiveness, but I slammed the door in her face. I don't want anything to do with that toxic woman or her spineless husband. Honestly, it's not the end of the world for them to be kicked out. They'll get their lives back together eventually. I know they'll never forgive me. They'll probably even turn my grandson against me. But I'm fine with that. I've already given too much to be nice to my daughter-in-law. I've learned the hard way that no matter how much you give, some people just won't appreciate it. And you know what? I'm okay with that now. I'm fine being called a grumpy, selfish old man who kicked his son, daughter-in-law, and one-year-old grandson out to live on the street. The only thing I regret is my grandson. That little guy has no idea what kind of parents he has. He's suffering because of their stupidity, but I'm not going to get involved. Update 4. So, my daughter-in-law tried to break into my house, but it didn't go well. The cops ended up taking her away. After the last apology she made, which was pretty embarrassing, she tried to break in. She came in the middle of the night, broke a window, and tried to get inside. But I'm an old man, so I'm a light sleeper. When I heard the noise, I called the cops. I had no idea it was her. I just thought someone was trying to rob me. Luckily, the only gun I have is in my workshop, so things didn't get worse. Anyway, even if I had known it was her, I still would have called the cops. She'd already broken in and was looking for my keys when the cops showed up, and I turned on the lights so she couldn't run. She got arrested for breaking and entering. She called my son, and he came to my house yelling at me the next morning. He said my grandson couldn't be without his mom. He even asked if I could take care of him while he tried to get her out of jail. I have no idea how much money he's got for that. I told him absolutely not, and I was thinking about calling Child Protective Services because they're clearly not good parents. In the end, he left, but that wasn't just an empty threat. I really do think I'll call CPS if it comes to that. Plus, some commenters said I should. Update 5. All right, so there's good news and bad news in this update, though nothing bad for me. First, my daughter-in-law's dad came to help her, though he wasn't happy about it, not just because she was in jail, but because everything came out during their trip for the birthday party. So, he was really upset with her. He got her out of jail, but from what I hear, he cut all contact with her after that. My son told me that when he came asking for his house back. After he left, I called CPS. They took my grandson from him and gave him to me since I'm the closest relative. I'm not sure what will happen now since it's temporary, but I'm just happy I get to spend time with him. We even celebrated his birthday together and I gave him my gifts. He's too young to understand what's going on, but he knows something's up.